Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar. I see a lot of folks are logging in, so we'll give this a few minutes as folks are joining us. But we're thrilled we got such an amazing response to today. We had over 300 registrants, so there'll be quite a few of us on today's call. We're really fortunate to have such a great team presenting today, and we're looking forward to hearing from you as much as we can and learning as much as we can throughout the course of the webinar. There's a few housekeeping things I'll go in. My name is Jim Atkinson. I am the Director of Programs and Services for Art Pride New Jersey. You'll notice at the bottom of your screen, there are a few tools. Mostly you'll be interested in the Q&A tool. So if you have a question at any point during the webinar for any of our panelists, please use the Q&A to ask that question, and we will get to as many as we possibly can, but we probably can't get to all. If you see a question that you like, you can upvote that question, which will help our moderator today know which questions to focus on. So please make yourself available to that tool. If you have a question for a panelist that you don't want to put out into the open questions, you can use the chat function for that, but know that we're more likely to see the question if it's in Q&A. You will also see your raise your hand tool. We're going to reserve that today in case there's a question where we want to see, one of the panelists may ask to see a raise of hands, or if you're called on specifically by a panelist, please use the raise hand tool. But for the most part, I'd like to request that you put your questions into Q&A. So I do see a few more folks still joining, but we do have quite a few on the line, and it is a very heavy agenda today, a lot to get through in a relatively short period. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today. Eileen Fouratt is a program officer for the New Jersey State Council on the Arts and is also chair of the New Jersey Cultural Alliance for Response. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Eileen.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar, Engaging Audiences in the COVID-19 Era. In mid-March, when most of the state shut down, New Jersey's arts organizations went into triage mode, dealing with closed productions, exhibitions, and venues and lost earned income. Many organizations pivoted to virtual arts events, providing solace for those in social isolation, educational content for students at home, and connection for teens whose own concerts and spring productions had been canceled. They began scenario planning as the shutdown stretched out with many unknowns. Now that New Jersey is moving towards reopening, we are fortunate to have two experts who are going to help us focus on how, through strategic communications, we can stay connected with our audiences and continue to engage with them. I'm pleased to introduce you to Dr. Kathleen Rennie, Associate Professor at New Jersey City University, where she serves as chairperson of the Marketing Department in the School of Business. Before coming to NJCU 6 years ago, she ran the Public Relations Education Program at Seton Hall University for 21 years. As she has taught, she's also continued to work with clients in a variety of sectors on strategic communication, crisis communication, and reputation management through her own firm. Rosemary Ostmann owns a boutique communications firm in Hoboken. Her firm, RoseComm, has created and directed communication strategies for some of the best-known brands in the business, including Sony, United Airlines, Procter & Gamble, PepsiCo, and Cigna, to name a few. Her firm also handles social justice campaigns for the Committee to Protect Journalists and the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey. Rosemary and her team have several national awards to their credit, including the Public Relations Society of America's Silver Anvil, the Sabre Award, and the Bulldog Award. We're going to get going right away with Dr. Rennie.
It's great to be here. Thank you. So during this time of unprecedented uncertainty, arts groups must continue to listen to and engage with their audiences. So at the same time, though, it's vital during this time when social distancing measures are there to listen and to reflect so that we know what to do at the point when our venues can open up again.
Today, we're going to discuss the essential strategic communications planning practices and highlight tactics that are currently being used to keep audiences connected, engaged, and inspired so that they are ready to return when you are ready to welcome them back.
So what's our agenda? Today we're going to discuss the essentials of strategic communication. So we're going to talk about the elements of communication that must be your focus in order to keep audiences connected, engaged, and supportive. We'll then share examples of good strategy and action. Finally, we'll talk about how you can start now to plan for what's next, even as the what's next remains completely unclear. So in short, we're going to talk about the science, that's my part, the method of strategic communication, and then we'll throw it to Mary and Eileen and Rosemary to talk more about the art of executing the plan right now during these unprecedented times. So you might not be surprised to know that only 29% of leaders are confident in their organization's ability to weather a crisis. Many cross their fingers and hope that crisis won't find them. Others have a vague crisis plan on the shelf, but it hasn't been looked at. It hasn't seen the light of day for months and maybe years. Others have plans that focus on logistics, but that leave communication out. And others simply are like, I don't know where to start. In fact, a recent study by the Institute of Public Relations, that's instituteforpr.org, if you're taking notes, found that 75% of organizations surveyed in April plan now to blow up their crisis communication plans following the experience with this epidemic. So, as many organizations have found over the past few weeks, the worst time to plan for crisis communication is during a crisis. But that, unfortunately, is where many people find ourselves. Even today, as I read articles on tentative returns for the arts, how to return and when we can return to the arts, many of the articles in the how-tos focus on logistics and operations. So things like patrons wearing gloves and masks, more ushers, more exits, temperature checks, audience spacing, those types of things. But communication is real secondary. So wherever your organization stands today on the spectrum of preparation, strategic communication cannot and should not be secondary. Strategic communication is, as many of you on this webinar know, is aligned with the organization's overall strategy to enhance positioning. Sometimes it's easier to explain what strategic communication is not. Strategic communication is not tactical. So it's not one event, one press release, an annual awareness day, a school program, a post, a tweet, a press conference. To gain a solid reputation, your organization must have a long-term and strategic view, not simply short-term moves, but a long-term communication strategy that's aligned with your business goal and the organization's core values. In fact, Paul Argenti is a professor from Tuck School of Business, and he's done a lot of work in this area. I've been on some webinars with him. And in a recent paper, he wrote that organizations that continue to take a tactical short-term approach to communicating with their key constituencies will find it increasingly difficult to compete. So developing an integrated strategic approach to communication is critical to success. And really, Argenti, months ago, was really issuing a warning when he wrote that with all the potential risks associated with businesses and nonprofits, and the many, many vehicles of communication available to all of us, and the ability for publics to sound off wherever and whenever they wish, there exists a strategic imperative for organizations to get strategic, right? So really what it means is to get it right, or you operate at your own risk of creating a brand crisis, or of making the crisis, when we encounter one like we're in now, even worse. And if you want proof of this, you can just look at how those who were out a strategy pre-pandemic are struggling right now to communicate versus those who had a strategic plan before all this stuff hit. In my academic work and professional practice, I have found that leading brands understand this strategic imperative, and they invest in three key elements that are vital to their reputations. There are three elements that we're going to focus on in this part of this webinar, and they include well-developed and communicated core values that differentiate the brand and the organizational culture. I call them your superpowers. Leadership that lives those superpowers and who consistently and clearly message in support of the brand values. So they become genuine brand ambassadors. and they also support the communicators. And finally, a strategic a communication strategy that's planned and practiced, and that's used in good times and in bad times. So we're going to take a quick look at each of these. We'll start with core values. So we're very familiar with values, right? Values make up the inherent, unchanging, and distinct character of an organization's image, what the organization is about, and what it's working to accomplish. And they are what guides the organization in crisis. So they are necessary in good times and in bad times. While values are often focused internally, when they're viewed as a genuine priority of the organizations, of employees, and particularly the leaders of organizations, they become apparent to everyone who comes in contact with the brand. So from customers, potential customers, vendors, regulators, and other partners. Frequently, however, brand values feature general attributes, things like quality or respect or integrity. Customer satisfaction is one you hear a lot. But these are actually just permission to play values rather than core values. For values to be truly core values, for values to have strategic impact on brands, brands must communicate more than permission to play values. Permission to play values are quite simply required employee behaviors that really don't distinguish one organization from another. Yet they are exactly what many organizations identify as their core beliefs. So to amplify the strategic power of your values, consider a focus and develop core values, which are a brand's never compromised, deeply ingrained cultural cornerstones that are maintained at all costs. Right? So your organization must be focused on its core values. It must take time, and now might be a good time to do it if you don't have it, to decide on them, and then, which is our second tip, is to keep leadership fully engaged in them. As I noticed, right, the second aspect of good strategic communication is the complete dedication of leadership. Those at the top of your organization, your CEO, your board members, must become your chief brand ambassadors. They need to lead the creation and maintenance of these distinct brand values. So in the same Institute of Public Relations study that I mentioned earlier, it was found that, again, in mid-April, 75% of organization leaders are very involved with their organization's response to the current pandemic. But I wonder if that was the case before the pandemic. I doubt it. Leaders must also sign on, so therefore, in the good times, right, to communicate and live their core values consistently and on all platforms. They must, in short, stick to the core values and to what you map out in your strategic communication plan. So this is the question that I get everywhere, all over the country from so many people is, what exactly is a strategic communication plan? What do I need in it? How do I know that I have it? Brand reputation and communication doesn't just happen. It's well planned according to a standard formula known as by the acronym RPI, or Research, Planning, Implementation, and Evaluation. So here you see a little bit of the science. The process is essential for both, again, proactive and reactive communication. And this webinar can't possibly unpack all the elements of RPI, but we're going to focus on the two key elements that are key in our current environment. And then Rosemary and Mary Eileen are going to reveal some more of the implementation features after I say a few words about research and planning. So your ability to strategically create, defend your organization's reputation, and deal with challenging times and adjust to our new normal depends on your ability to do your homework, right? How professorial of me to say that, but you got to do your homework. Research is implemented to define a problem or a situation, monitor your program, and then of course measure impact. And the methods you choose are going to be based on your needs, your budget, the size of your organization, really maybe your community. In good times and particularly in bad times, we need to take time to gather facts and to listen, all right? So this is the time that we need to ask and to think. Any strategic communication starts with research to determine a host of things. For instance, what are the current facts? Who are your primary publics? How do your primary publics feel? How do your primary publics prefer to receive information and engage? What is the most important thing to your primary publics? What are your peer organizations doing? What are they communicating? What are your core values? What really matters where you are? And what best practices can you identify? Today, as our doors are closed, we can take the time to monitor more, to listen more, to ask more, to gather information that can better inform our communication decision-making now and then as we move forward. With your research in hand, it's time to get to the next phase, which is planning. And this looks really complicated, but we will get through it quickly. This slide reviews all of the P elements of RPI, and this is the heart of any strategic plan. This, with the research, makes strategy strategy. It ensures that communication is aligned with your values and the business goals of your organization. It starts with restating your mission and core values, what you do and why. Then it forces you to think about your business goal. What's your organization business to do, right? Is it to raise money, to get more people to see performances, to increase funding? In most organizations, the business goal is sales oriented. Your business goal is very different from the next step, which is your strategic communication goal, because the communication goal focuses on communication. So you want to watch your verbs here. Communicators can raise awareness, increase attention, engage audience, but we cannot raise ticket sales. That's the business goal, and it requires many more elements than simply communication. So every factor of our business is working toward the business goal. Communicators should be focused on communication. Next, use your research findings to land on a specific audience or public, right? Who you're going to reach. Arts organizations, you do a great job at this. You are really good at segmentation. You know there's no such thing as the general public, and you do a good job at identifying, prioritizing, and communicating to various segments in ways that they like to receive information and from the individuals and groups that are credible to them. The next step requires you to create strategic communication objectives. And these are really, this is the heart of strategy. Objectives are steps to your communication goal. Every objective must be measurable. So you want to include a percentage or a number. You want to include your primary public in each objective, a completion date, and objectives have to be realistic. They must be based on your research findings. And you also have to stay in control of your verb here too. Make sure that you're using communication verbs. So a strategic communication objective would not be to increase media coverage. That's not good, right? It's not measurable, it's not time bound. It would be better to do something like to increase media coverage of the Arts Center's summer programming by 10% by May 2021. Remember, as you do this, that who you target in your objective, how much impact you're aiming for, and your completion date is all contingent on your research. What's realistic and what's going to help you get to your goal. And one more thing about objective that I see everyone doing a lot is that objective should be focused on outcomes, not outputs. An output is a tactic, a communication artifact, like a press release or an event, ribbon cutting, a tour, a mailing. Outcomes are evidence that you've moved the needle to awareness, media coverage, engagement, and more. So don't write objectives that are focused on tasks, on tactics. Write them so they're focused on the impact of those tasks. Strategies, the general approach should be taken by tactics in a strategic plan. For example, a strategy might be reinforcing local and state educators' belief in the value of a summer arts program or enlisting influential third parties. Strategies are often confused with tactics. They are not the same. A strategy is a general approach to your communication, and tactics are the specifics of how it's going to be carried out. Lastly, what essential messages must be communicated in all your tactics? The plan's key message must be communicated. That key message can be communicated externally, like in a slogan, or it can be part of your theme, or you can just keep it in your plan and know that every communication must send that same message. Depending on the complexity of a plan, you might need a messaging guide that can actually create from A to Z what your organization communicates, how it's positioning itself, what it talks about, and what it does not talk about. So only after the R and the P can you move to the I, the implementation, the fun part that everybody, the art that everybody wants to do. Nobody wants to do these two things, which is really, really important. So we're now going to talk to Mary Eileen, who's going to share a little bit about some of the implementation tactics that are used today in the field. And then Rosemary's going to take over to show some other examples.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. So next we're going to take advantage of some of the creative work that's been done right here in New Jersey. And we're going to hear from Courtney Schroeder, who's the marketing director at Two River Theater, Howard Levine, who's the executive vice president of marketing and development, State Theater, New Jersey, and Ed Kirchdorfer, managing director, Mayo Performing Arts Center, and have them take a few minutes to talk about how their organizations have stayed connected to their audiences during this time. We'll start with Courtney, and Courtney, when you're ready, you can raise your hand and Jim will unmute you.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Yeah, so I would say about, we stopped performances on March 12th, and we knew right away that we wanted to keep engaging with audiences and also to just keep awareness of Two River Theater out in the community. So we took about a week to brainstorm how we might do that in a way that was focused and in a way that we felt was manageable. So on March 19th, we launched a digital campaign that we've been calling Seen at Two River. The funnel through which we are looking at is through the history of Two River Theater, different productions that we've done. That just helps us to focus the content. So the goal of this, like I said, was really twofold. It was to keep engaged with our audiences and also to keep awareness of Two River Theater out there. So what we've been doing is we're posting daily content to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. We have a weekly email promoting our content. We're featuring the content on our website, and we've also created a featured landing page where all of this is being hosted for those that are not social savvy. And we're also sharing the content with press on a weekly basis. So the weekly Broadway World emails are featuring the content, local newspapers. We even got a shout out on one of Governor Murphy's daily briefings, which was pretty awesome. The way we've broken down the campaign, we have a couple of facets, and it's a really institutional-wide effort. We have a committee that's made up of members from the marketing team, the education department, the artistic team, the development team. So everybody's really helping because it's not easy to crank out new curated daily content. So the first facet of content we're pushing out is artist features. And these are videos of Two River artists that they're performing songs, monologues, choreography from past productions. The second is called TRT at Home. And these are video and blog posts that feature DIY projects, crafts, activities for kids and families, and lectures tied into the themes of our productions. So a lot of this content is being created by our education department and our special events manager. And part of this is also a video series called Two River 10. And these are videos led by Two River teaching artists, focusing on self-care. And those videos are all 10 minutes or less. The third is staff spotlights. So we have a variety of staff members through all departments. So we're featuring photos and little Q&As with them. And then the last facet of it is online events. So we launched this with Shakespeare Sundays in April. Every Sunday at 3 o'clock, there was a Zoom call hosted by our artistic director, John Diaz, and different Shakespeare actors and directors. So they would do a class focused on a different Shakespeare topic. That's morphed into our Shakespeare play reading group. So we are in the middle of having a group of mostly staff and a couple artists doing a community reading of Romeo and Juliet. That's happening on Zoom. There's one meeting set up for each of the 5 acts, and each runs about an hour with a Q&A. We've been having live Facebook story times, so different staff members and artists are reading kind of like children's books that have tied into our children's productions. And last but not least, we're diving into the world of online fundraising events. So our first event's going to take place next week. It's a virtual beer tasting in partnership with one of our restaurant partners, Triumph Brewing Company. So for $100, people will have a growler of beer dropped off at their house and a snack pack. They'll get an intro by our leadership team at the theater, and then the head brewer of Triumph Brewery is going to talk them through the brewing process and give a tour of Triumph. So all new terrain for us, but very exciting. So overall, we've received really great feedback about this engagement from our patrons. Almost all of the content that we're pushing out, we're doing organically to keep the costs low. However, we are offering honorariums, about $75 honorariums to our artists and teaching artists who are creating the video content, because that is more involved. And if anybody wants to check out what this content looks like, I just encourage you to follow Two River Theater on social or check out our website.
Courtney, thanks so much. That was a great rundown of all that you're doing. Howard, if you're ready, you can raise your hand and Jim will unmute you.
Thank you, Mary Eileen. I hope everybody is doing well in these interesting times. Like Mary Eileen said, I'm in charge of both the marketing and development areas of State Theater in New Jersey. We have been as active as possible in these times. We are a large presenting theater, and it has definitely been a bit of a pivot to see how we can get the art that we often present on our stage as part of our mission of live entertainment out into the internet world. And because we're a presenter, we don't always control what the production of that art form. However, we do have some education programs that we have put out. We have several artists in residence that have done music residencies with us, and we have had them create a bunch of series that we've put out on video content, both through our social media channels as well as part of our website that we have created, just like Courtney did at Two River. We call it Culture Fix, Online Culture Fix, which is a landing page on our website and also linked out in various social media channels, where every other day or so we are updating with new online content from our artists in residence. We have a children's series called Milk and Cookies, which were small gatherings in our theater, which have now moved online. And we are engaging with our artists, our Milk and Cookie singers and storytellers, and they're producing work that we're putting out online for online consumption. All of that is free to our public. We are also working with some presenter shows and like Menopause the Musical. They are streaming their performances online, and money is going, partial donation is going to the Actors Fund to help support actors, where we're supporting that program and helping to push that information out on our Culture Fix pages. We're also working with Renee Fleming, who has a series called Music in the Mind, which she has started doing a online lecture series. She has been touring with this for a while and now is doing it online every Monday, where we are also helping to support that and push that out. On our Culture Fix pages, we present lots of other links to some of the artists that have been on our stage, either video links or their books or their music, to help with engage with our patrons. We also have even done coloring contests where we've put out some of the programs that have been on our stage as colorings that children can do and submit, and they can win prizes, and we post that on our social media. And a podcast series, which we have on that page as well. Our largest presented series is a Broadway series, and at some point we will be announcing next season's Broadway series. Once we have a little bit better idea of timing, but in the meantime, we're continuing to build interest and maintain that audience by having an online Broadway singing contest. We're doing this both through social media channels and through our Culture Fix landing pages, where people can submit videos of them singing their favorite Broadway show tunes. And there will be a panel of judges that will vote, and we will put out the top votes out on social media for lots of people to vote on. And a winner can get a golden ticket to our entire Broadway series next year once it restarts. And then we've done lots of things on social media just to keep people engaged, between a spring auction of some of signed items that have been signed by people who have been on our stage. Microphones, guitars, posters, both to raise money for the theater and help support the theater, as well as keep the awareness going of the arts. We featured our pets working from home at our computers, our laptops from home, just to get some social media buzz, and continue to push out the arts as much as we can. On the online front, we are doing, about to announce Zoom happy hours with some of our major donors and patrons, where the artistic staff on our end will have very small gatherings through Zoom to answer questions, to talk about plans for the future, the series that we're planning ahead, just to keep our higher level donors engaged. And we are also working with some playwrights who will be writing some short scripts that we will be commissioning from them that will allow our community to actually perform these skits. They're things that are being written for families, for couples, for individuals, that they can get the script, download it, it's original pieces, and they can perform it in their homes. All for a way to get people to do things on their own at home.
Oh, Howard, thank you so much. That's great. Appreciate all that, the information of everything that you're doing. And now, finally, Ed is going to fill us in on what Mayo's been doing.
Hi, hey everybody, can you hear me? Okay, first of all, hope you're all doing well. Thank you for having me participate in this. Much like Two Rivers and State Theater, we have been echoing a lot of the same things to our constituents as well. The first thing that we got going when our offices closed on March 18th was to get up a virtual arts page. That's what we call our page, and that's pretty much a collection of things that are out there in the arts that are shareable and free across the board. Being a presenting organization, also, we don't have a lot of archival material to work with, so we tried to think about the model that we present to our public and recreate that online. And that virtual arts page satisfies a lot of that, to the point where we market that page now very similarly as to how we would market specific events to people with specific interests. So the page has Broadway, jazz, classical, etc. We will target those communications specifically about those events that we have on that page toward those audiences. We started producing some live Facebook concerts in early April. We have them on Fridays. They're called Facebook Live Fridays, and it usually features a local artist for a half an hour on Fridays, and then we can keep that going the rest of the week on our virtual arts page as well. And whatever other archival free concerts that we've done in the community, we post on that as well. We feel that our connection with the community is vital to what we do. So we also established a page where we call a community hub, where we can have staff profiles and volunteer profiles, and the people that you're used to seeing at the theater when you come to see a show, you can still kind of engage with them in some way. We really wanted to engage with our volunteers a lot. We have a senior, a volunteer core that's mostly senior. Obviously, people who are somewhat affected by what's going on in the world right now. So our operations team created a Facebook page specifically for our volunteers to engage with each other, to stay in contact with the theater and to feel that they are part of our greater family. On the education side, we've done some really amazing things, not only finishing out our semesters through Zoom classes, but creating a whole new semester until we figure out what we're doing with our summer camps that we just launched on Monday, which not only feature normal classes that we would have, but also tapping into areas that we haven't had a chance to go into before for adults, such as improv, stand-up comedy, voiceovers and stuff like that, and utilize teachers that not only are from our school and from our educators, but also alumni from the program who may be in LA or other parts of the country. And it's very exciting to see about 200 people sign up for that in the course of 2 days. The thing we're probably most proud of is a video that our performing arts company, which is a troupe of 24 teens who perform at nursing homes and senior centers and nonprofit events that would have performed at Thrive if we had it this year. They did a version of You Will Be Found from Dear Evan Hansen that was shot from all their homes. We called it a message of hope that we pushed out into the community. The kids felt very strongly that students were feeling isolated, and they really wanted to put this song together to know that we're all part of something unique, and there's a lot of togetherness there. And we have several thousand views through all the platforms that we ran that video through. We're also looking at going into the happy hour fundraisers, happy hours with our major donors, who we've been in contact mostly through phone calls, and continuing to figure out ways. We're going to be in this for a while, so we continue to work on new ways that we can engage our public over the course of the next several months. Our next thing coming up will be a 45 minutes performance by our education department, utilizing some of their Broadway friends as well as alumni from our program that we're going to use as a fundraiser, again, to just let people know that we're active in the community, we're here for them, we are providing arts experiences for them, and we want to stay in touch with them as we go along through this together.
Oh, thanks so much, Ed. That was great. And I did see that video. It's incredible. It's really beautiful. So now we're going to give Rosemary a chance to share some examples of other messaging that is effective.
Thank you, Mary Eileen. So let's go back to the I and our pie first. I want you to look at these and think of them as best practices that you can use as a framework for your creative ideas. Before you execute, you can ask yourself, does this reflect the strategy and objectives in our plan? Does it give our audiences what they want? Am I able to deliver my key messages through this idea? Does it reflect our core values? And can we pull it off? It's okay to admit when your organization is not in a position to execute well on an idea. And finally, is this creative? We are all working with limited resources, especially right now, and you can really use this framework as a way to find the ideas that are worth doing. So how do you put these best practices to work? We've picked 6 examples that we think really stand out that we want to share with you today. I recognize that some of these brands have enormous budgets that we do not have, but I hope that their work serves as inspiration nonetheless. So Kathy, if we can advance to the next slide. The first is the Dove Courage is Beautiful campaign. This is a great example of making a quick pivot in response to a crisis. The centerpiece of this campaign is a 30-second spot that features healthcare heroes. It shows the marks on their faces from the PPE that they've been wearing. Of course, these are their battle scars in the fight against COVID-19. The message that accompanies this campaign is a thank you to the frontline workers who are risking their lives. It's also paired with a very real $2 million donation to 2 nonprofit organizations helping people through this crisis. The best practices that this campaign exemplifies are that it mirrors the long-term values of the Dove brand. It also links very well to their key messages. Real Beauty is a campaign that predates the pandemic. It's all about redefining the notion of beauty through the stories of real women. By staying focused on that core value, Dove actually prepares for a crisis like COVID-19 for many years, not the 4 or 5 days it actually took them to put this campaign together. I also want to say that this idea wasn't entirely original. Dove was inspired by a photographer in Italy who was taking pictures of healthcare workers and sharing them. They were on the front lines of this epidemic for weeks before it came to the United States. So even a big brand like Dove is taking inspiration from something. Not every great idea is, completely original. And like any good campaign, it doesn't stop with one piece of creative. This was the initial 30-second spot, but they followed it with a hand washing, almost like a public service announcement with the tagline, "We don't care which soap you use, we care that you care." During the spot, it showed the 20 seconds that are required to wash your hands effectively. And they used the hashtag #WashToCare. And what made that stand out for Dove is their willingness to think about the greater good and to reflect that in their messaging, not just selling soap. On to the next. I'm sure everyone on this webinar has seen the Getty Challenge. Of course, this came from the Getty Museum in California. They asked people to recreate works from the museum's collection by posing with family members, pets, and household items. These are probably the only things that are easily accessible to us during the quarantine. They issued this campaign on their social media channels, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. This challenge was truly expertly executed. It had very simple instructions, 3 easy steps, and an invitation to use digitized and downloadable images from the museum. They made it very, very easy. And when you're looking at a campaign like this, which in marketing terminology is called consumer-generated content, when you're asking a consumer to create content to carry your brand message to the marketplace, it absolutely has to be as simple as humanly possible. This is also a perfect example of engaging your publics. It not only cured the boredom that we are all feeling in quarantine, but it gave us a reason to smile. And I think we're all really looking for a reason to smile right now. This was largely a social media push for the museum, but it was widely covered because of its popularity by the art media as well as mainstream media, which really amplified the message and created more exposure for the museum. And like the Dove campaign, this was an idea that the museum was inspired to execute because they saw another museum in Amsterdam doing something similar. So don't be afraid to see something that you love and to translate it into an idea that makes sense for your organization. Now we have the National Cowboy Museum. The marketing team at the National Cowboy Museum, which is based in Oklahoma, came up with this super creative idea for keeping their audiences engaged during their closure. They tapped the only person who is deemed an essential worker for the museum, Tim Tiller, who is the head of security, for a social media takeover. They asked him to give quick tours and to select things from the museum to post that people might find interesting. And apparently they gave him no other instruction, just to do that. And what resulted was a wholesome and totally authentic series of posts that absolutely won over the internet. It absolutely engaged publics, to go back to that best practice. Tim admitted that he was quote unquote brand new to social media. He admitted he would be making mistakes, and he actually asked the social media community for help with his posts. One of his signature moves that people really loved was he didn't really understand what a hashtag was. So he, on every post, would write the symbol for hashtag and the word hashtag, which became quite comical. Then he also started referencing Seth in marketing. Seth is the chief marketing officer of the museum who was directing him what to do from home. And he would say things like, Seth from marketing says I need to use the @ symbol before someone's name so that they know that I've tweeted about them. Or Seth in marketing says that I actually need to be in the selfie station before I take a picture of the selfie station to share it with you. So that whole Seth from marketing became another character in the narrative he was creating. So this idea is obviously a lot of fun, but we, as Kathy told us, we can't just do ideas because they're fun, they have to be measurable. So let's talk about the impact of what happened with this museum. Their following on Twitter went from fewer than 10,000 followers to 308,000 followers. On Facebook, their following is approaching 100,000 each for those platforms. I heard one social media analyst a couple weeks ago say that their engagement was up 600% as a result of this takeover. They also won some celebrity fans in Sarah Silverman and Toby Keith, not so bad. This effort was covered by CBS Sunday Morning, NPR, and the Wall Street Journal. Those are media outlets that probably would not have given exposure to the National Cowboy Museum in Oklahoma had they not done something so clever. Well, they're in Oklahoma, so they were able to open on Monday, and they were debuting a delayed but now highly anticipated children's museum. So they've really been able to create momentum and to continue it forward into their opening. Next, we have everyone's favorite hippo, Fiona. After closing due to the pandemic, the Cincinnati Zoo started a daily Facebook Live called Home Safari. It's not just a live stream, they also included interactive activities like art and quizzes and a Q&A that takes place during the live stream. What made this so compelling is that it addressed an immediate need, and some of the field examples that we heard today did this as well. Kids across the country were suddenly home from school and in need of educational content, and they introduced this very early. This started on March 15th, so they were among the first of the organizations to really provide that educational content. But it wasn't just that it was a 20-minute distraction from quarantine that made this so successful. They stated their goal was to make people happy, and boy, do these live feeds make people happy. It also mirrors their values. In one of the articles where the social media team is being interviewed about this, they literally were quoted saying, "The Cincinnati Zoo's mission is to inspire every visitor with wildlife every day, which is hard to do when you don't have any visitors." So again, going back to that implementation best practice of reflecting your values and your mission. The results for, just a couple things. On the results for Home Safari Live, they gained 1 million new followers to their Facebook page in the first 2 weeks of introducing Home Safari. they now have a total of 3.3 million people following the Cincinnati Zoo. They also introduced a fun feature. I think one of the questions that came through on the Q&A was about the fatigue that people are feeling from all this online content. And I don't know anyone who has used this yet, but they introduced that you can have Fiona the hippo or other well-loved animals from the zoo actually appear on your Zoom for 15 minutes in exchange for a donation to the zoo. And the bottom line result is they may be losing revenue because they can't welcome visitors into the zoo right now, but the number of donors is up by 487% since the pandemic hit. The next example we have is Airbnb and the announcement of their company layoffs. Announcing company layoffs is an undertaking most communicators dread. This is a 1,694 word letter from their CEO to announce the reduction in force. A Forbes headline about this letter says it all. Airbnb lays off 25% of its employees. CEO Brian Chesky gives a master class in empathy and compassion. In the letter, he was transparent and thoughtful. He clearly explained the decision-making process that went into the need to reduce the staff. He also talked about the steps that the company was taking to help people find new opportunities and how their benefits would be impacted. Immediately after sending this letter to the employees, he shared it publicly. And I can tell you from having been involved in a lot of these announcements over the years, that is something most executives want to avoid, not immediately share. People don't want that correspondence getting out into the marketplace. He also included his email address in his communication and created his personal email address and created an online directory for their employees to put up a portfolio for prospective employers to find them. That is unheard of in the technology world, that someone would welcome an organization taking their talent. That directory received 250,000 visits in the first 3 days after it was launched. Here's the tweet that I have up on the slide here that he shared when he shared the letter. We have great people leaving Airbnb, and I think other companies will love them as much as I do. If you're hiring, reach out to me with the email address and our team will connect you. And then within the message, he says, and this shows that they really are sticking with their mission. Our mission is not merely about travel. When we started Airbnb, our original tagline was travel like a human. The human part was always more important than the travel part. What we are about is belonging, and at the center of belonging is love. Note the second use of the word love. That is not typical when you're talking about correspondence from a chief executive during a time of a layoff. The entire social media world was talking about this letter when it came out. The tweet itself, you can see, has almost 8,000 likes and more than 1,000 retweets. What could have become a reason to dislike or doubt this brand during a difficult time actually built brand loyalty for Airbnb. And then I would be remiss if I didn't address the TikTok craze in this presentation. TikTok, the social app, has been downloaded 2 billion times around the world. That number has accelerated during the pandemic. There were 2 million downloads of this app during the first week of the pandemic alone. While this is largely a Gen Z app, the latest growth is coming from millennials and even from Gen Xers like myself. If you haven't used it, the best way to think about TikTok is it's a mobile-first sound-on video app. Some people call it bite-sized YouTube. There are 5 to 60-second videos created using lots of fun filters and features. We all know that we are drawn to our mobile devices during this pandemic as a way to connect with each other. And what people really like about TikTok is it's not just about shared consumption. We're not all consuming content together, but we're actually creating content together. And that's what TikTok is really best for. Most of the videos are about dancing and singing and pranks, but we're seeing lots of examples of using TikTok for news dissemination. in education, and I've even been reading in therapy. In some applications it's being tested. So it's not just something for our 13-year-old children to be using for their dance moves. I just want to suggest 2 examples for you to take a look at if you want to learn more about how this is being used. The first is #DistanceDance, which is an initiative from Procter & Gamble to encourage people to stay home and stay safe. They partnered with Charli D'Amelio, who is a 16-year-old TikTok influencer. She has 56 million followers. She created the dance. She created a video showing people how to do the dance. And then she captioned the post with the instructions saying, if you create a video and share it, P&G will donate money to Feeding America and Matthew 25 for the first 3 million videos. So far, this campaign has 15.6 billion views. So that's one to take a look at if you want to see how a brand like Procter & Gamble came up with something, issuing a challenge and partnering with an established TikTok influencer. Even the news media are getting in on TikTok. The Washington Post, their TikTok has 500,000 followers and 22 million likes on their videos. When you take a look at it, you'll see the content is all created by one guy named Dave. It is channel appropriate. They're not breaking hard news on TikTok. It's all about quarantine life right now. But before, it was about office culture at the Washington Post. They did videos with different reporters. They would have fun with different headlines. So there are many, many applications beyond what we see sometimes from the kids with their dances. And it's being taken seriously by a lot of brands and something that we should all be considering, especially because of the rise that has happened during the pandemic. I do want to say that if you aren't on TikTok, not to fear. I just heard during Social Media Week last week, a presenter said that only 4% of brands are active on TikTok. So don't feel, if you haven't embraced it yet, that you are behind the curve. The last thing I want to say is that yesterday I was listening to a presenter from Twitter, and he said the best way to be successful on Twitter is to look at the good tweets. So I hope that by looking at some of these good examples of what people are doing to communicate during COVID, you get some inspiration and some ideas for you to consider as you draw closer to reopening your facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, so much. We have just a few minutes for questions. We're getting close to time. I don't think any of the panelists have a hard stop, but let's try to get to these questions. I think Rosemary spoke a little bit about the burnout, and if Ed or Courtney or Howard, want to respond to a question too, you can raise your hand. So here's one from Brian. Have any of the speakers had experience using their online video and other resources as a premium offering to their patrons and subscribers that limits access to subscribers, donors, or ticket holders? If so, what is their experience with that success? Sounds like that's more for the field people. Courtney has a couple people have their hand raised.
Yeah, we haven't gone down that road yet, but we are investigating the possibility of either some live readings or possibly making one of our archival videos available. I think according to the Actors Equity regulations, we have to do it it would have to be under the guise of like a fundraiser, a limited time fundraiser. But that's kind of where we're at. We're kind of, our general manager has been taking part of a lot of calls, and we're trying to research what capabilities we have there that follow all the rules, and how we could do something like that and feel good about the quality of what we're putting out.
Great, thank you, Courtney. From John, he says, thanks for putting out this information. Good stuff. Would it make sense to provide in-person artistic experiences temporarily for free at places where people are starting to gather, like parks and beaches? That too sounds like the field. Ed's raised his hand.
I think the concern about that is, how many people do you want to have gathering here? I think you have to be very careful about what the government regulations are going to be. So if you have a artist, and suddenly there are a lot of people surrounding that, that's probably going to violate social distancing rules. So I think we really need to be careful how we approach something like that. I think everybody's probably seen things about the rise in interest in drive-in movies, and we've been discussing the idea of drive-in concerts where everybody's, obviously in their car and they'll be safely socially distanced. So there are possibilities. I think those we'll probably see more examples of that in the next few weeks, probably from other parts of the country.
And here is a comment from David. I'm running to teach, but thank you very much for this, extremely helpful. Happy to provide feedback at a later time. Stay safe. Okay, and just want to make sure that we responded to, oh wait, someone's asking if we're recording this. Yes, it is being recorded. So that will be available after this. And just want to make sure, Ilda had asked, have you received complaints about burnout from too many online offerings from art centers? I don't know if any of the Rosemary or Kathy want to respond to that, where you feel like maybe the field is putting out too much stuff.
I haven't seen that yet. I mean, there are a lot of people talking about Zoom fatigue, but I think that's more in a work context. People are being asked to sit on their computers and look at their own face for hours on end because that's the only way meetings are being done right now. And people are missing good old-fashioned phone calls. But I think that there is still such an enormous appetite for cultural content that people have not grown tired of that yet. And I will also add that right now we are hearing every day that various summer camps are closing, and I have 2 children myself in New Jersey, and I can tell you that we're all trying to figure out, all my friends are trying to figure out how we're going to keep our kids engaged over the summer. Also, I'm hearing from a lot of my peers who have college-age students that as they find out that classes aren't going to be in person, even if they will stay enrolled at their current school and take classes online, they are looking for ways to spend their time to be purposeful and productive. And there are plenty of students who are planning to not enroll. I saw one survey that said 1 in 5 college students is not going to enroll in the college that they plan to attend because of COVID-19. And they're looking for ways to spend their year. It won't be a typical gap year.
Wow.
So I think all of that presents an ongoing opportunity for organizations that are part of this group to fill that gap.
And that's part of the research, and this is the time to listen and to be, and then to figure out how your values and your strategy and your positioning fits into some of the things that we're hearing. You know, this is the time to be creative. We were talking about how excited we were to be on this webinar because first of all, we love Jersey, and we really could lead. We were hit so hard here, and our arts can really lead here, and that's what we're hoping for you all.
Great. I have one more question from Sarah. Do any of your presenters have advice on how to keep our audiences engaged once we start to open up, but with limitations to gatherings? And she's from a museum.
I think, it's all about, from what I've been reading and seeing from any sector, from education to art to sports, it's being transparent. It's sort of like 9/11, when the theaters that we went back to were those that were going to tell us how we were going to remain safe when we were taking in a performance. So I would urge everybody to, again, either partner with health facilities, start talking to folks, but really you want to be as transparent as you possibly can. Telling people how they're going to be safe when we go back is not going to deter them from coming. it's going to make them feel more safe to come back.
And I would add to that that you should start with your employees. That if your employees don't feel safe and they don't feel that you're looking out for their best interests, they will not be your advocates to your patrons coming back. So it's important to start there. And also, as Kathy said many times during her part of her presentation, making sure that the leadership is also modeling the behaviors. I can tell you I've seen at least one client post a picture that did not show social distancing after they've been preaching social distancing. Really, it has to be modeled from the top, and you have to make sure you've taken care of your employees and that they trust you before you even try to reach out to your patrons to tell them what you're doing or that it's time to come back.
Okay, one more question from Alex. In Kathy or Rosemary's experience, do they feel it's ever appropriate to adapt the organization's mission in the case of such a widespread crisis? The world is so different now. Do we need to reinvestigate our core values to respond appropriately?
I think that it's always a good time to look at your core values. Again, like I said, I think the biggest problem with core values is this permission to play. People think they have good core values, but it's not distinctive. It doesn't differentiate their brand from the next. So really, I would urge everybody to take a look at the core values to make sure that it really does differentiate, that it's not just a permission to play, something that the next theater or the next, arts organization has. What's really your unique and distinct core values? And then that's when it's easier to live them and breathe them, when you are in good times and in bad. I don't know if that helps, but I don't think you should change your core values based on what's happening in the world, in your environment. I think your core values should be strong enough to take you into any environment. If they're not, then it might be time to kind of do a little diagnosis on them.
I would totally agree with that. I think this presents a moment to reflect and to make sure they're right, but not to change them, because they should be sustainable beyond any particular event or crisis.
In fact, the crisis is when you look in the mirror and say, like, who are we? And your core values should answer that question.
Great. And from Mike, in the current world of consumer-provided content of all qualities, shouldn't the staffs of performing arts centers be refocused on online technological savvy in addition to routine administrative marketing functions? I'm not sure I understand that.
If I understand it, I think that you're really speaking to why TikTok is taking off and why brands are jumping on board, because this pandemic has forced us to adapt to all things online almost all the time. And we're all learning new technologies to be able to do all facets of our lives online. So this is kind of a silver lining, I think, is that it's accelerated that adoption of new technologies. And I agree. I think we need to embrace that we are in an ongoing two-way conversation with our audiences. And we need to understand that in order to be effective, we have to get comfortable with trusting our audiences to help us tell our story with consumer-generated content. And that's, for an established organization, that can be uncomfortable, but we have to find ways to experiment with that in ways that we are comfortable, to start to see that is how communication is happening today. So much of it is happening through social media, where people are sharing your message or their twist on your message. And the key is to make it easy and engaging for them to be able to do that for you. So you have to let go of some of that hesitation you might have had in the past of having to own everything, and empower them to be your storyteller.
Great, thank you.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone today. I want to thank Kathy, Rosemary, and Mary Eileen for leading us through this session. It's been a lot of information to get into a very short period of time. So I commend you all on pulling that off. I also want to thank Howard, Courtney, and Ed for sharing their experiences with what they're doing with the field. as well as our partners at the New Jersey State Council on the Arts for helping us make this webinar possible. I want to encourage folks to visit jerseyarts.com/at-home, which is where we've been promoting for the past several weeks and months, been promoting your virtual experiences that you're offering to your audiences. We've been trying to help push that message out there. I also want to remind folks that Art Pride actually hosts a webinar each Friday around COVID-related resources and how the crisis is impacting the field. So you can get information on that at artpridenj.org/COVID-19. But before you leave, if you could just take a minute to respond to that poll that we posted, just to let us know how we're doing. It's anonymous, so we won't know if you don't like us, but hopefully you're finding the information that we're putting out helpful and useful. And if you do, again, want to see information on upcoming webinars, visit us at Art Pride, and we can try to continue to get information out for you. So I hope everyone stays safe, and I want to thank you all for staying with us for a little bit this over time. So thank you.